No one looked at me when I arrived. That was the point. I stood still for a moment, heels pressing into the cold gravel, letting the wind whip at the lapels of my dark coat. Across the field of white stones, heads bowed, metals gleamed, and flags trembled in the late autumn light. Rows of chairs lined the memorial site in perfect symmetry. All occupied, none for me. Arlington was quiet the way only sacred places could be too quiet to scream, too hallowed to interrupt. The sound of my footsteps would have been rude if I had dared move. So I didn't. I waited. Veterans Day, November 11th, 2023. 10 years since I disappeared from the family photo wall. I was still breathing, still surviving. But to them I was already gone. The canopy overhead fluttered slightly in the breeze, snapping against its metal frame like the edge of a folded flag. Beyond it, the stone bore its beloved father of Daniel and Emily. Nothing else. Not even space left blank. Just an omission so deliberate it stung worse than any insult. I swallowed the bitter air and stepped closer. Daniel stood in his crisp suit posture, practiced chin lifted as if the cameras could still be lurking. His hand rested on the small of Mother's back in that politician's gesture. He'd perfected a blend of control and support, mostly for show. He didn't glance at me. Margaret wore gray, not black. Pearls around her neck, arms, folded spine, straight as a gun barrel. She gave me a nod, imperceptible, mechanical, as if I were a former acquaintance, not her daughter. Not the one who used to salute in the mirror. Emily's eyes found me. Just briefly. Guilt shimmered there, unspoken and unspent. I gave her the smallest smile. She didn't return it. Her fingers tightened around a folded program, knuckles white against the printed name that used to mean safety to all of us, Richard Rhodes. I had nothing left to do here. No seat to take, no name to be read. I wasn't in the eulogy. I wasn't in the obituary. I wasn't even in the damn footnote. 10 years of service erased with the stroke of an editor's pen. My hand brushed the back of an empty chair, but I didn't sit. I turned, intending to leave. Not with a scene. Not with a goodbye. Just one more quiet exit the way they preferred it. But the sound stopped me. Boots. Deliberate. Clipped. Walking toward the center of the gathering, the honor guard froze mid-salute. Heads turned. Even the wind paused. A voice rang out, sharp, commanding, trained. Admiral Natalie Rhodes present. It wasn't a question. It wasn't a request. It was a declaration. Gasps rippled like the fluttering flags above. I turned to see the speaker emerge from the rows of officers. Commander Julia Reeve. She wasn't in the program. She wasn't supposed to be here. But she was. And she walked with the calm fire of someone who had waited far too long to be silent. Her uniform was immaculate. Her insignia gleamed under the November sun. She stepped forward, boots planting with absolute authority, then halted beside me. We were eye to eye. She gave no smile, no nod, just a crisp acknowledgement. "We've waited long enough," she said. "It's time." People began whispering. Margaret's shoulders locked in place. Daniel clenched his jaw so hard I could see the veins pulsing beneath his temple. Emily's hand rose slowly to her mouth as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing, what she had maybe secretly always hoped for. A moment passed, then another. I took a breath and stepped forward. 1, 2, 3 steps onto the marble aisle. I didn't march, but I didn't walk lightly either. My presence had weight now, one I didn't ask for, but one I would no longer deny. And as I moved to the front row, past the beloved children who had clipped me from the record, past the silences they'd curated for years, I heard the murmurs swell. Commander Reeve remained standing, as if to say, "This isn't over." I met her gaze. Then I faced the flag, the folded triangle resting on the polished oak casket, the one they wouldn't have let me touch. Until now. The silence was no longer sacred. It was cracked open, and for the first time, they couldn't ignore my name. If he wrote to me, why did I never receive a single word? The question echoed in my head as the front door shut behind me. The Rhodes house hadn't changed. The marble floor was still spotless. The portraits still loomed over the hallway like judges in uniform, and the smell of polished mahogany mixed with something colder, dust maybe. Or memory. Emily hadn't come in with me. She'd slipped me the key before vanishing back into the mourners. Her voice had been soft, almost hesitant. Check the drawer beneath the medals. He wrote, a lot. I didn't ask what she meant. I was afraid if I spoke, she'd take the key back. The study was exactly as I remembered it, except emptier. The air was colder in there, too, like it had forgotten how to be breathed. My father's desk stood untouched, massive carved oak, cluttered but not chaotic. Everything had its place. Military commendations on the wall, a faded Naval Academy banner, paperweights shaped like aircraft carriers. His old uniform still hung behind the door, covered in plastic, untouched, unworn. I walked around the desk, fingers brushing over the brass lamp, the corner of the blotter, the crystal decanter he never filled. The drawer she'd mentioned was locked, but the key slid in with surprising ease. It clicked open with a sound like a sigh. Inside, stacked neatly, were envelopes. Dozens of them, bound in dark blue ribbon. My name was written on every one in his unmistakable hand-block letters, steady and sure. I didn't touch them at first, just stared. The postmarks were missing. No stamps, no return addresses. Just my name, again and again, across months, years, 2011, 2014, 2017, 2020. The first one I opened was dated March 8, 2011. Dear Natalie K. Biebel must feel like the edge of the world. I remember that feeling. I know I shouldn't write operational security and all, but I had to tell you I saw the footage. You moved through that alley like you were born for it. I'm proud of you. Your mother says not to send this. She thinks it'll make you sentimental. She thinks emotions are a liability in the field. I think she's wrong. But I'm still letting her win, aren't I? I'm sorry. Love, Dad. I read it twice, then 3 times, then reached for another. Warsaw, Jakarta, Brussels. Each letter written in secret, sealed, but never sent. Every word he never said aloud now spilled out in ink-raw, conflicted human. I was still holding the last letter when the door creaked open. Margaret. She stood at the threshold, arms crossed, expression carved from stone. No surprise in her eyes, no curiosity. He didn't want to weaken you, she said simply. My hands clenched the edge of the drawer. He didn't want to forget me either. That's not what I meant. I looked at her, truly looked. For the first time in years, I saw not just the mother who cut me out, but the woman who thought silence made a soldier. Maybe it made survivors, but not daughters. There's a difference between strength and neglect, I said. She didn't flinch. You had your own path. You didn't need his approval. I didn't need it, I said, voice sharper than intended. But I earned it. She left without another word. I returned to the drawer. Beneath the last bundle of letters, wrapped separately, was a heavier envelope. Thick parchment. Government seal. I unfolded it slowly, heart tight in my chest. Command transfer authorization, Operation Red Crest, to Vice Admiral Natalie Rhodes. Dated August 29th, 2020. My breath caught. It wasn't just a personal gesture. This was formal, official. My father hadn't only trusted me, he'd selected me. For command. For responsibility. For legacy. My eyes moved to the bottom of the page. 2 signatures. Richard Rhodes. And beneath it, Daniel Rhodes. That stopped me cold. I stared at his name. Sharp black ink, no hesitation. But something was wrong. There was no stamp, no timestamp, no record of processing. The document had never been filed, never entered the system. It had been prepared, then buried. The tablet on the desk lit up, suddenly flickering with a secure pop-up. I hadn't touched it, but it recognized me. Reeves' encrypted line. I tapped it open. Level 3 files unlocked. You've been activated. The message pulsed once, then vanished. I looked again at the command letter, fingers trembling. Daniel knew. He had known all along that I was the intended successor, that Dad had put it in writing. And yet somehow this document had never seen daylight. How many people had been complicit in making sure I never saw it? I rose slowly, the envelope still in hand, and turned toward the darkened hallway where their pictures still hung in perfect order. They erased me from memory, but not from the mission. And now someone had just reactivated everything they tried to bury. If I was so unimportant, why did someone rewrite my record? The lights in the data center buzzed with that sterile hum only government-grade facilities had. Cold, constant, unapologetic. It matched the temperature inside my chest. I stood next to Reeve as the reinforced door to the Red Crest archive hissed open. The biometric scanner blinked green as it read my iris the first time it had done so in 3 years. Not because I hadn't tried, but because until yesterday the system had me flagged as inactive due to reassignment. Translation erased. She glanced at me but didn't speak. She didn't have to. The air between us buzzed with something heavier than static anger, maybe, or anticipation. I wasn't sure where one ended and the other began. We stepped into the vault. Rows of terminals glowed softly, each one a gateway to truths buried deeper than bodies. Red Crest wasn't just a classified operation. It was the kind of ghost the Navy never spoke of unless you knew where to look and who to fear. A man named Morris waited at the center console, tapping nervously at his tablet. Civilian contractor, early 40s, eyes darting like a man who'd seen more secrets than medals. "You have level 3, he said, barely meeting my gaze. "That hasn't been granted since Admiral Rhodes passed." "I didn't ask for it," I said, "but I'll use it." Reeve nodded toward the screen. "Start with the login trails. We need to know who touched her file and when." Morris keyed in the parameters. Lines of code scrolled by, dozens of timestamps, each linked to a file access point. I scanned them until a name jumped out. E. Pierce, 6 months ago. I leaned forward. "Play it." He hesitated. "There's more. Not just access. There's voice data, too. An internal call." He pressed a key, and the room filled with the low hum of audio distortion. Then a voice. Familiar. Breathy. "Ethan Pierce." "She can't know," he whispered into the line. "Not yet." I didn't breathe. I remembered that voice too well, especially when it said things behind closed doors. She thinks she's been shelved. But that was the point. The quieter she gets, the less they look. The less they look, the longer we have. Silence. Then Red Crest is still active. But not for long. The recording ended. Morris looked at me like he expected me to scream. I didn't. My heart had already gone silent. Not from shock, from calculation. Reeve spoke first. "That was internal routing. No external leak. That means he was talking to someone inside I finished. Someone with authority." Morris tapped another sequence, pulling up a permissions overlay. "It gets worse," he said. 6 months ago, your name was re-entered into the Red Crest command log as successor. Then why wasn't I notified?" He looked pale, because 24 hours later, your name was removed. The log shows manual override. By who he didn't answer. He just turned the screen. Override authorization DR017X Daniel Rhodes. I stared at it for a long time. I wasn't erased by accident. I was redacted. Reeve said it aloud. "You're not erased. You're redacted. That means someone feared your truth." She said it like a revelation, but I felt it like a scar reopening. "Keep going," I said. Morris hesitated. "There's a trail. You're not going to like it. I haven't liked anything in 10 years. Try me." He opened the system logs deeper, pulling from a subdirectory I hadn't seen in years. Operation Red Crest had protocols hidden even from vice admirals, but my father had built those protocols, and he'd left me the key. As we sifted through access logs, one sequence caught my eye. A document labeled NR Transfer Tier 7. I ordered it opened. It was a strategic readiness report, one that outlined the contingency plan for a command shift in Red Crest, dated 2 months before my father died. My name listed clearly as successor. Language Stark direct Vice Admiral Natalie Rhodes to assume operational control upon commanding officer's incapacitation or passing. Right below it, a second-line amendment pending review by DER. But that review never happened. Because Daniel had already marked it no action required, with no note, no reason. He hadn't just ignored the transfer, he'd buried it. My stomach coiled. He signed off on the ceremonial honors, but not the command. Reeve crossed her arms. "Your father's authority died the minute Daniel intercepted the process. You were shut out before the ink dried." I stepped back, pacing once to steady the tremor in my spine. "Why give me full activation access now?" Reeve met my eyes. "Because someone in the chain just pulled your name back up. Probably thinking you'd stay quiet. Be grateful. Move on. They think I'll play nice because I was silent." "No," she said. "They think you're still alone." I looked back at the screen. The cursor blinked beside my redacted record like a heartbeat trying to restart. Then, let's see what he buried with my name on it. They thought silencing me was strategy. It was just a pause before the verdict. I stood at the edge of Major Linton's desk, hands clenched behind my back. The office smelled of dust and pine polish lined with legal texts that no one ever actually read, only quoted when convenient. Linton had a clipped voice, polished boots, and the kind of expression that never invited small talk, just as I preferred. He tapped the screen in front of him. The Marshall Recovery Fund is buried under 3 layers of military-approved nonprofits. On paper, it looks like aid for veteran housing and rehabilitation. But underneath, I stepped closer. The trail snakes through a shell corporation, Phoenix Asset Holdings. Offshore registry, no board members listed publicly, but one financial advisor authorized multiple wire transfers to it. He swiveled the screen toward me. Authorized consultant D. Rhodes. I didn't blink. How much? 3,012 days after Ethan Pierce was removed from Operation Stoneglass in 2011. I exhaled through my nose. That timeline wasn't just familiar, it was the start of everything that began to unravel. Ethan had gone silent. I had been reassigned without warning. Files had disappeared from my access queue. And now, the money had a name. They paid him to vanish, I murmured. Reeve, leaning by the window, arms crossed, nodded slowly, or to stay quiet. Linton cleared his throat. The fund was audited last year. No irregularities found. Because no one looked hard enough, I said. They weren't searching for political suppression. They were looking for embezzlement, which Linton said carefully, you now have grounds to allege. But if you go public too soon, I won't, I interrupted. Not until I can bury them with it. He smirked faintly, then stood. I'll compile what you need. Expect resistance. Reeve and I exited the building without another word. Outside, the wind was sharp against my cheeks, but I welcomed it. It kept my pulse steady. We walked a block in silence before she turned to me. I tracked one of Ethan's last civilian movements before his discharge. A cafe. Georgetown. Cameras still in operation. You want it, pull it. An hour later, we were in a dark van parked 2 alleys from the cafe. A small screen buzzed as Reeve queued up archived footage. There, Ethan. Slumped posture, civilian clothes. Looking older, wearier. Across from him, Daniel. He was in mid-sentence when the audio caught. She can't see this. If she does, the medals won't matter. Ethan said nothing, just stared at the table like it might split under the weight of whatever Daniel had offered. I sat back to the words circling my head like vultures. Medals, legacy, appearances. Always the currency of our family. My phone buzzed. A text from Emily. I found an old USB in Dad's coat. It's not labeled, but I think it's for you. My fingers tightened. Emily. She wasn't choosing sides, but she was offering pieces. We met that night in the garden behind our old church. She didn't say much, just handed it over, then walked away like the shadows were safer. Back in my apartment, I slid the USB into an air-gapped terminal. No label, no metadata. Just a single folder phase transition plan E, Q4. Inside one document. Strategic plan for succession disruption, Rhodes Command. My name appeared 6 times, none of them complimentary. The file detailed the projected effect of my exclusion public narrative control. Psychological discreditation, chain of command redirection. Bullet pointed like battle objectives. At the bottom, 2 signatures, Daniel Rhodes. And just above the footer, a directive typed in bold. Remove NR before Q4 initiation. I stared at the words. A cold calm settled in. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't overthinking. It was betrayal. Documented. I sent the file to Reeve with no comment. 10 minutes later, she called. We go public, she said. Her voice was calm, lethal, but not yet. Let them think you're still out of moves. They took my name off his tombstone, but not from his legacy. The Rhodes estate looked different at night, less like a monument and more like a relic. The marble pillars, once imposing, now cast shadows too long to trust. The garden lights blinked against the breeze, the hedges perfectly trimmed, as if nothing unspoken could bloom here. I stepped inside without knocking. The key still worked. Some part of me hated that. The hallway smelled the same sandalwood and history. The portraits lining the walls were unchanged. My father in uniform. My mother at his side. Daniel's graduation. Emily's commission. No image of me. As if I'd never existed. I didn't go upstairs. I didn't need to. I turned left into the study, past the heavy curtains and worn rug toward the family library. There was a picture of my father near the fireplace, framed in gold leaf, untouched since the day it was hung. His eyes stared into some distance only he could see. Behind the frame, I found it. The latch was small, nearly invisible, an old naval trick he'd taught me when I was 12. Push, twist, slide. The wall gave a click, then opened to reveal a hidden recess. Inside was a small wooden box. I pulled it out, holding it like it might vanish. It wasn't locked, just sealed with care. I opened it slowly. A single medal gleamed beneath the lid. Navy Distinguished Service Cross. Untarnished. Unpresented. Beneath it, a folded scan of the original command authorization. The real one. Dated, signed, stamped, with my name where it belonged. And beneath that, a handwritten note. You're the only thing I was ever proud of without needing to say it aloud. I stared at the words until the ink blurred. Behind me, the sound of footsteps. I didn't turn. I didn't have to. Margaret's voice was frost on marble. Do you think this will fix what you ruined? I closed the lid. I didn't ruin anything. I'm just cleaning what you refused to look at. She didn't move. You could have been anything, but you chose shadows, distance, obscurity. I chose duty. To whom? Yourself. To the truth, I said, finally facing her. You think this is about revenge. But I'm not fighting to be included in your version of the story. I'm writing a new one. Her gaze narrowed. For a moment, I thought she might cry, but Margaret Rhodes had long since retired her tears. She turned and walked away, heels echoing like a gavel in judgment. I didn't follow. My phone buzzed on the mantel. Reeves' name lit up the screen. I answered. The committee just summoned you to testify, she said. And this time, they can't keep your name off the record. They weren't looking for justice. They were waiting to see if I'd flinch. The room wasn't built for comfort. Oval, windowless, and lit with fluorescent resolve, it reeked of institutional design. Along the walls, small red lights blinked on the embedded recorders, proof that silence here wasn't safety-only evidence. I stood in full dress whites. The ribbons were polished. The badge gleamed. And still none of it felt like armor. Vice Admiral Keller sat at the center back, straight, chin-high expression unreadable beneath a veneer honed over decades. Beside him, 5 officers of varying ranks, 2 I knew by name, 1 I knew by scars. All of them watching like they were trained to find fracture points. To my right, Commander Reeves sat, eyes forward, hands folded in front of her, unmoving. To my left, the opposition JAG attorney, Lieutenant Colson, ambitious and young, the kind who didn't blink when calling out a superior's misstep. Behind him sat 2 aides and 1 civilian observer, with a press badge tucked into his breast pocket like a blade. Keller began without preamble. This is a preliminary review concerning alleged interference in the chain of command related to Operation Red Crest and the late Admiral Richard Rhodes. Admiral Natalie Rhodes. You are here to respond to these concerns. I met his gaze. Understood. Colson stood. Let's begin with the evidence you've submitted, namely a personal letter and an unsigned copy of a command transfer authorization. Are you presenting these as conclusive? They match both my father's official authorization format and handwriting. The metadata confirms it was created on his command system, I replied. There's also a scan with timestamps showing the document was buried manually. Colson clicked a slide remote. The screen behind him flickered to life, displaying the scanned letter and the directive, remove NR, before Q4 initiation. Emotional damage, Colson said smoothly, is not legal proof, Admiral Rhodes. You're asking this council to prioritize a broken family dynamic over operational security. I didn't flinch. I'm asking this council to recognize that operational security was used to conceal internal sabotage. You were never officially removed. He countered. No, I said, but my role was obstructed. There's a difference. One is protocol, the other is erasure. Murmurs rippled. One of the junior officers looked up from his notes, something sharper in his expression now. I had hit something. Then the door opened. Margaret Rhodes stepped into the room without announcement. Dressed in her signature slate gray coat, pearls gleaming her posture could have commanded a fleet. She walked toward the council without hesitation, ignoring every pair of eyes trained on her. "I apologize for the disruption," she said, voice calm and practiced. "But I felt it necessary to clarify something." Keller raised a brow. "Mrs. Rhodes, this is a closed—" "She's acting alone," Margaret interrupted. "The family never supported this line of inquiry. Her father didn't intend for this to become a matter of disgrace. Natalie's pursuit of this is personal." The room went still. Reeve didn't move her head, but I caught the side glance, sharp as steel. "You just showed them who really broke the chain of command," she whispered. I felt my lungs tighten, but I didn't respond. Not yet. Coulson smiled like a man who'd just found his closing argument. Keller leaned forward. "Admiral Rhodes, due to the conflicting nature of the evidence and the added uncertainty presented by your family's position, this panel is placing your command status under temporary freeze effective immediately pending further investigation." The words hit with military precision. There was no room for appeal. I rose, understood. Keller nodded. "You are still to be addressed with full rank, but your active orders are suspended." I turned every eye on me now, some skeptical, some curious, a few pitying, but only one burned cold. Margaret. As I stepped away from the table, I passed her without breaking stride. Then I turned to her, letting the full weight of my voice settle into the air between us. "You won today, but not for long. Some names vanish from files. Others stay like stains in the margins. The cabin looked like it had been forgotten by time, half buried in pine needles, roof sagging at one end, windows shuttered so tight it was impossible to tell if anyone still breathed inside. But I knew someone did. I could feel it. That kind of silence doesn't come from emptiness. It comes from waiting. North Carolina hadn't changed much in 20 years. Still damp with fog, still heavy with stories. This place had been a hideout once, on paper a supply checkpoint. In practice, a makeshift war room for missions that didn't make it into the official history books. I knocked twice, then once again. Nothing. I reached into my coat and pulled out the old photograph. It was weathered and faded, but clear enough. My father, Marlowe, Ethan. Me just out of training, barely 25, looking at the map like it held all the answers. And in the back corner, a figure that shouldn't have been there. Emily had spotted him. Her voice trembled slightly when she called me earlier. "There's someone in that photo, not supposed to be there." I knocked again, then slid the photo under the door. 30 seconds later, it opened. Colonel Wes Marlowe looked older than I remembered, but not weaker. His hair had gone fully white. His left hand trembled slightly, and a scar that hadn't been there in 2011 now ran from the corner of his jaw down to the collarbone. He didn't smile. He didn't blink. "You're not supposed to know where I live. I'm not supposed to know a lot of things," I replied. "But here I am." He looked down at the photo by his feet. His expression didn't change, but something in his posture slackened. I told them I never wanted to see that picture again. "Then look past it," I said, "and look at what they did to us." He picked up the photo and stepped aside. I entered without waiting. Inside the cabin was darker than it looked. No lights, save for a kerosene lamp in the corner. A battle map was stretched across the dusty table pins, still stuck in like the mission was on standby. Dog tags hung from a nail on the wall. A stack of sealed folders sat on the mantel. Marlowe moved like a man who knew which ghosts were his and which weren't. "I'm not going to talk about Redcrest," he said. "That operation was buried for a reason. I'm not here to exhume it. I'm here because someone used its corpse to kill my career." He finally looked me in the eye. "Still a Rhodes." "Still cleaning up after one," I replied. We stood in silence. Then I pulled the scan from my coat. The transfer order. My father's signature. Daniel's too. Marlowe studied it for a long time. I signed papers that buried good men, he said at last. But I won't bury her. He turned to the fireplace and pried open the brick behind the grate. From the hollow, he retrieved a small cassette. Analog. Deliberate. Recording of a debrief, he said. 2011. Ethan was told to amend the report. Redact your input. Suppress casualty data. You were named as successor in one draft. Then scrubbed. My fingers tightened around the cassette. Who gave the order, I asked. He didn't answer. Marlowe. He met my eyes. Daniel. He was there as observer. Claimed to be acting on behalf of your father. But Richard never approved the edit. I know. I asked him myself. Clarity hit like cold water down my spine. This wasn't just sabotage. It was layered, coordinated, personal. Marlowe sat down slowly, breath heavy. Tell your father I kept my word, he murmured, even if he's not here to see it. I crouched beside him, the cassette now tucked into my inside pocket. He's watching, I said. And now so will the whole damn country. They wanted to erase me in silence. So I'll speak where silence isn't allowed live. The makeup artist finished with a soft dab under my eye, then stepped back without a word. In the mirror, I saw her face focused, unreadable, and slightly awed. Behind her, the producer counted down on her fingers. Red light blinked on. The cameras were live. Bright studio lights cut through the room like interrogators. My uniform sat crisp under the glare ribbons, aligned with precision. I was used to tight collars and tighter scrutiny. But this was different. This wasn't a briefing. This was war. Broadcasted. Miles Cooper sat across from me. The veteran journalist, salt and pepper hair reputation for fair fire, offered only the smallest of nods before he turned to the camera. Tonight on 60 Minutes, a name you may not know but will remember. Admiral Natalie Rhodes, once rumored to be sidelined by circumstance, now speaks. On legacy, on silence, and on what remains after both. He turned back to me. Admiral Rhodes, thank you for joining us. My pleasure, Miles. He wasted no time. There's been a spike in interest around a now declassified file, Operation Red Crest. You served under that operation, correct? Yes. I also lost my command under its shadow. And you believe he continued tone-sharpening that shadow was manufactured. I looked directly into the camera. When your name is erased from the record, when your father's directives are hidden in drawers and your accomplishments are labeled unauthorized, it's no longer a shadow. It's a decision. He leaned back. That's an accusation. It's a pattern. The silence hung tight as the stitching on my lapel. Who made that decision, he pressed. I didn't blink. A brother who erased my name. A mother who redacted my legacy. The control room must have held its breath. On screen, the social feed ticked upward. Admiral Natalie trending by the minute. Miles didn't flinch. Why speak now? Because silence was their strategy. They expected I'd keep playing respectful. But respect doesn't mean surrender. He nodded once. If your father could hear you now, what would you say? I glanced down, then back up. He wrote it already. I'm just reading it aloud. Somewhere off camera, I felt Reeve watching through the studio monitor. I knew that stare, calculating, protective. She knew what this cost and what it might trigger. By the time the segment ended, the internet had detonated. Within an hour, the phrase Red Crest funding gap had been cross-referenced by online watchdogs. A Reddit user traced a sequence of blocked budget transfers from the Naval Logistics Fund directly into shell entities connected to DR Holdings, one of Daniel's pet trusts. Screenshots flew. Anonymous sources leaked more. TikTok theories spun fast, but some hit too close to be coincidence. Daniel responded by issuing a 2-line statement. My sister's interview was a deflection stunt. The Department of Defense has no pending investigation. The statement didn't trend. The hashtag Admiral Natalie did top 3 in under 6 hours. At midnight, my secure line buzzed. A code-only message from Ethan. They're watching me. They know I kept records. I stared at the screen, then typed back 3 words. Send. Everything. Now. He carried my silence for a decade. Now I'll carry his voice. The corridor reeked of antiseptic and recycled air, clean, quiet, and utterly wrong. I moved past the first security checkpoint with the code buried in my father's classified field logs disguised as coordinates from an aborted 1996 mission. The guards didn't stop me. The badge still worked. Authority has a way of lingering even after people try to erase it. Sublevel 4. No signage. Just a matte black door with a red sensor and a camera that didn't blink. I tapped twice. Waited. The light turned green. I stepped inside. The room beyond was cold and dim, humming faintly with the buzz of low-voltage machines. One bed, one man, Ethan Pierce. He sat upright but looked like he hadn't slept in days. Hair grayer than I remembered. Eyes sunk deep like the years had burrowed in and built homes behind them. He didn't move when he saw me. "Thought you'd never come?" he muttered. "You knew I would," I said. He coughed. Not from sickness, but from years of silence. I kept it all, he said. "In case you ever came back." I sat opposite him. No guards, no monitors. The facility had blank spots, intentional ones. My father had designed this wing as a fallback safe house. What no one expected was that I'd use it to break someone out. "You don't have long," I said. He laughed bitter and dry. "That's the first honest thing anyone's said to me in years." I reached into my coat and pulled out a photo. Red Crest 2011. Me, him Marlowe. My father. All smiles, before the cracks. "Why'd you do it?" I asked. He looked away. "Because I thought protecting the operation meant protecting the people. I didn't realize they were the threat." A beat of silence passed. "They'll kill you," he said. "They're already trying," I replied. "But they'll get to you first. Unless we move now." He hesitated. His hands shook slightly. Then from under the mattress he pulled a small metal drive, old battered but sealed in coated plastic. "Everything's here," he said. "The full operation log from 2011, voice recordings, authorization trails, financial flows, even the directive from Dr. Daniel." I asked. He nodded once. He wasn't always the villain. But he saw the game and decided to win it. I took the drive, tucking it into the reinforced pocket sewn into my uniform lining. "We'll protect you." He looked at me, then really looked. "I won't make it to testify. You know that." "I'm not asking you to save me," I said. "I'm giving you a way to save yourself." He closed his eyes, then whispered, "Then take it. Use it fast." My earpiece clicked twice. "Reeve." "They're moving him," she said. "Unmarked convoy, 15 minutes out. If you're still inside, I'm already gone." I pulled Ethan to his feet. His legs buckled, but he managed. We moved through the corridor down the side service exit, avoiding the surveillance lines outlined in my father's old blueprints. At ground level, headlights cut through the fog. Reeve's backup team. 2 black SUVs, plates, unregistered drivers in plain tactical gear. The lead officer saluted me, then turned to intercept the inbound convoy. I didn't wait to see what happened next. Ethan was loaded into the second SUV. I climbed in after him, slammed the door, and only then exhaled. He leaned his head back, eyes closed. "I carried your silence," he murmured. 10 years. "Now I carry your voice," I said. Back in the safe house, I inserted the drive into a decrypted reader. The first document opened instantly. Signed by DR, Expedited Termination Protocol. They built a hearing to silence me. I'll turn it into my loudest scream. The room at the hotel was barely wide enough to pace, but I wore a trench into the carpet anyway. The hearing wasn't until 10. I had 6 hours, but time didn't move normally the morning before you became evidence. On the table lay the uniform. Crisp, white, not yet worn. Across from it, a box of documents Ethan had delivered himself. His hands had shaken as he handed them over, not from fear, he'd moved past that, but from the weight of finally being free. They'll try to discredit every line he had warned, but they can't erase the timestamps. Next to the box sat a smaller envelope, handwritten, sealed in the wax my father used on official family notices, old school ceremonial. Emily had given it to me that morning, eyes glassy. "He wrote it," she whispered. "The night before, his heart gave out. I found it inside his Bible tucked between the Psalms." I hadn't opened it yet. I was still afraid of his voice. Instead, I focused on the task ahead, organizing files, tagging pages, cross-referencing statements. My testimony wouldn't just rely on emotion. It needed precision. It needed to land like a verdict. Reeve arrived just before sunrise. She didn't knock. She didn't have to. She looked around the room at the papers, the evidence, the chaos, and said only one thing. "You ready for the whole country to stare at the wound? I'm not the one bleeding anymore," I said. She sat on the edge of the desk, pulled out a flash drive. "This contains the compiled media leaks we expect to drop during your testimony. Timeline aligned with your father's signature logs, Ethan's recording, and the transfer authorization. Use it." I pocketed it without a word. At 8:00 a.m., Ethan came in. He looked better than he had in Norfolk, but still pale. Ghosts don't fade overnight. He set a folder down beside the box. My statement, sworn. Includes financial logs and the metadata from the Red Crest modifications. I'll sit in the back row, but I'll stand if they call. They will, I said. And when they do tell them everything, even the parts that hurt. His nod was small but firm. The sun crept higher. Shadows shifted. Coffee cooled. At 9:27, I finally opened the letter. The ink was fading. His handwriting was rougher than I remembered. "Natalie, if they ever try to question your honor, let them know I believed in you first. Not because you were flawless, but because you never stopped choosing the hard road. That's what being a Rhodes meant long before I wore stars." Dad, my breath hitched. I folded the letter carefully and slid it into the inner pocket of my uniform. It would sit next to my heart when I took the stand. Reeve stood and handed me the coat. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "This is not revenge. This is remembrance." I changed in silence, buttoned each piece with reverence. As the last clasp clicked into place, I turned to face the mirror. For the first time in years, the face that looked back at me didn't wear grief. It wore purpose. A knock on the door broke the quiet. I opened it. A congressional staffer stood outside holding a clipboard and a thin smile. "They're ready. You're next." They thought I stayed quiet because I was guilty. I stayed quiet because I was gathering truth. The oak-paneled chamber of the United States Capitol was colder than I remembered. Not in temperature, but in posture, in the gleam of camera lenses like unblinking eyes, in the weight of silence hanging before a storm. The Military and Defense Oversight Committee sat before me like a firing squad dressed in patriotism. Red ties, silver stars, and in the first row behind them, the public seating journalists' aides' families, mine included. Daniel sat 2 rows behind the committee dais, calm as a sculpture. His suit was tailored, his smirk preloaded. Reeve stood against the back wall, arms folded, eyes calculating every breath in the room. Emily sat near Margaret, whose posture was ramrod straight, as if this were a family recital instead of a reckoning. The gavel cracked. Senator Paul Grayson leaned forward, his presence weathered but razor-sharp. "This session of the Joint Committee on Military Oversight is now in order. Admiral Natalie Rhodes, you may proceed." I stood slowly. The full dress whites weighed more than ever, but this time it was the right weight. "I begin," I said with words my father wrote before his death. I held up the letter, the crease still fresh from my coat pocket. "Let her speak. She's earned it more than any of us." I paused. The room didn't breathe. For 12 years, my name was redacted from the legacy I helped defend. Not because I failed, but because I didn't play the game. I laid the flash drive on the witness table. A staffer collected it, slotted it into the system. Screens illuminated behind me, pages of financial statements, metadata trails, security logs. We are about to view excerpts from Operation Red Crest Archives files, previously inaccessible, now authenticated through cross-agency clearance. These include audio logs, interdepartmental transfers, and voice confirmation of coercion. The first video played Ethan's face, grainy and hunched, whispering into a burner phone, "She can't know. Not yet." Next, a screen grab of an email from DR Holdings, offshore wire receipts, black site funding routed through 3 shell accounts. The final image froze on one name under each file, Daniel Rhodes. Grayson leaned in. "Admiral Rhodes, are you suggesting your brother orchestrated this cover-up?" I didn't blink. "No. I'm stating he financed it, executed it, and profited from it." Gasps rippled through the room. Daniel smiled. Slowly. the kind of smile you wear before a punch. "You're lying," he said, standing suddenly. Cameras snapped. I turned to face him. "Then why is your signature on 6 restricted funding trails across 3 black sites?" His jaw twitched. Grayson banged the gavel. "Mr. Rhodes, you will remain seated." "No," I said, cutting in. "Let him stand. Let the country see what silence protects." The air was thunder without noise. Grayson looked at Daniel, then back to me. "Mr. Rhodes, you are hereby summoned to testify under oath. Now, you can deny rumors, but not your own voice on tape." The hearing room felt smaller today, like the walls had leaned in overnight, hungry for blood. Every seat filled, every breath captured on high-definition lenses, every twitch of a jaw dissected in real time on half a dozen live streams. The temperature hadn't changed, but no one would have known it. Everyone was sweating. Daniel Rhodes sat in the witness chair now, his posture perfect, his hands folded in a way that said controlled while screaming cornered, but his voice, calm, calculated. I did not reroute black budget funds. I did not alter Red Crest command protocols. And I most certainly did not orchestrate a cover-up to defame Admiral Natalie Rhodes. His words echoed with the well-rehearsed cadence of a man who thought charm could outtalk evidence. He paused for effect. The press held their pens. "The only legacy I protected," he added smoothly, "was our father's." My jaw clenched, but I didn't speak. "Not yet." Grayson nodded once. "Admiral Rhodes, do you have further rebuttal?" "I do." Reeves slid the flash drive into the console like a dagger. The monitor behind me flickered to life. A grainy video. A dated timestamp, March 3rd, 2011. Colonel Wes Marlowe's voice, unmistakably hoarse. He said she was too close to the truth, that her loyalty was inconvenient. He ordered the authority reassignment himself. Used the old man's name to make it stick. Grayson turned toward Daniel. "Do you recognize this?" Daniel's smirk faltered. "I was never at that meeting." I pressed a button. Second audio clip. Marlowe, again, voice lower this time. "Daniel Rhodes. Said to remove her from active command before Q4. Said she doesn't understand what's at stake." The camera panned to Margaret, my mother, whose fingers trembled around her pearls. Then, for the first time, she spoke. "Stop," she said. Just one word. But it cracked like glass. All eyes turned. "You were never meant to replace him," she said, voice shaky. "You were meant to hide his shame." Daniel blinked. What Margaret stood. "You told me after Warsaw. You said her file would destroy everything. You said it would make people question your father's final year." Daniel's face twisted. "You told me to keep her out." Gasps rippled through the chamber. I said nothing. Instead, I opened the final page of the letter in front of me. My father's original signature still intact. Still unread. Effective immediately, I authorized the transfer of full operational command of Red Crest to Vice Admiral Natalie Rhodes. I held it up. No theatrics, just truth. Grayson's voice was colder now. "This document is notarized, dated prior to Admiral Richard Rhodes's passing and validated by internal timestamp." "Is that correct?" "Yes," I answered. Daniel stood mouth open, but no sound came. Grayson didn't wait. "This hearing is adjourned. Pending criminal investigation." They called it a comeback. It was never that. I just stopped letting them write me out. The seal of the United States Navy loomed large behind the stage. Banners flanked the sides in ceremonial blue and gold. A single podium stood at the center, polished to the point of reflection. Around it, every row of chairs in the chamber was filled. Admirals, officers, analysts, even civilians invited for the moment. The air held something rare in Washington reverence. I stood at attention, dress whites, flawless ribbons restored. The uniform hadn't changed. I had. Across the room, Reeves stood beside the Chief of Naval Operations, her jaw as steady as always. Ethan, in a tailored civilian suit, watched from the front row, his eyes rimmed with a kind of exhaustion that only honesty brings. Margaret wasn't there. Not visibly, but I could feel her absence like a cold breath on the back of my neck. A voice rang out. By authority of the Department of the Navy, in recognition of service rendered without compromise and in the interest of institutional integrity, we hereby reinstate Admiral Natalie Rhodes in full rank and honor. A round of applause started soft, then spread, like thunder learning its voice. I stepped forward. The CNO gestured for me to speak. I approached the mic, scanned the sea of uniforms and suits and blinking cameras, and simply said 6 words I never stopped serving. You did. Silence first. Then applause sustained this time. Some stood, others followed. One by one. Reeve approached, her gloved hands holding the rank insignia. This belongs where it never should have been removed. She said, her voice low enough for only me to hear. She affixed the bars to my shoulders with precision, then stepped back and saluted. I returned it, every muscle etched with memory. The weight was familiar now. Welcome. Meanwhile, miles away, a black SUV pulled up to a Georgian-style home nestled in Arlington's quiet. Federal agents emerged. No lights, no sirens, just quiet certainty. Daniel opened the door himself. No resistance, no panic. Just a hollow calm as they read the charges: misappropriation of defense funds, obstruction of military oversight, conspiracy to falsify command orders. He said nothing. They cuffed him, led him down the steps. A neighbor filmed from behind a hedge. The feed hit the news within the hour. Back in the Navy Hall as the ceremony closed, Ethan walked up with something in his hand, a small wooden box. You should have had this a decade ago, he said, placing it in mine. Inside, my original medal for Red Crest leadership, still polished, still waiting. I found it in a drawer behind your father's photo, he added. I didn't know what it was until now. I nodded, unable to speak. Reporters flooded the exit as I stepped into the sun. A woman with a press badge broke through the rope line. Admiral Rhodes. 1. Question. Do you forgive your family? I paused, turned to face the cameras. Forgiveness is not silence, I said, the wind catching the edge of my collar. I've said what needed to be said. My story wasn't a redemption arc. It was proof they were wrong all along. The great hall inside the Pentagon gleamed like a cathedral of steel and silence. Polished marble floors, flags hanging in perfect symmetry, and the massive seal of the Department of Defense mounted behind the stage like a silent sentinel. Every seat was filled. Military brass in dress uniforms, families of the fallen, lawmakers, civilians, cameras, history. I stepped forward without notes. My uniform caught the light not from pride but from purpose. The moment wasn't about reclaiming something lost. It was about showing I had never surrendered it to begin with. I let the silence hold for a moment. It was mine now, not forced, chosen. This isn't just my honor, I said. It's every woman who was told to wait her turn, every officer who stood alone, every truth that took too long to be heard. I saw heads lift, eyes lock. 3 words carried me here, I continued. Duty, silence, truth. Duty because I was raised to believe that loyalty mattered more than credit. Silence because, sometimes, they don't punish you by firing you. They punish you by pretending you never existed. And truth because it doesn't rot when buried. It roots. I glanced toward the side wall. There, newly installed between portraits of admirals and medals that spanned 2 centuries, was a framed photograph. My father holding me at age 5 in front of a line of officers. The corner once snipped from the family album now restored in full, my name etched underneath, not a footnote, a title. Justice did not come early, but it came with all its weight. I stepped back. The applause didn't erupt. It rose steady and sustained like something long overdue. Some people stood. Others followed. On the front screen, a live transmission from the White House flickered on. The president appeared briefly, offering only a single nod, solemn and deliberate. History finally remembered her right. As the ceremony closed, I turned and made my way through the line of families' handshakes, quiet congratulations. Emily caught up to me near the central column, her voice low. Dad would be proud. I didn't hesitate. He was, long before anyone else. I once stood in silence behind a name that wasn't mine. Now I teach others how to answer their own. The classroom smelled like salt and cedarwood polish. It was the same smell I remembered from my first week at the academy, back when I sat in these chairs wide-eyed and certain the world would reward honor. Now I stood at the front of the room, chalk in hand, ribbon nameplate on my uniform, and 24 cadets staring back at me with the same mix of nerves and reverence I once carried in my bones. "This course isn't about war strategy," I said. "It's about something harder: to master integrity under pressure." No one moved. No one whispered. A few gripped pens tighter. The silence wasn't fear. It was intent. People will tell you to follow orders, and they'll be right until they aren't. I wrote one word on the board behind me: accountability. This saved more lives than any weapon I carried, and cost me more than any bullet ever could. When the bell rang, no one rose immediately. It took the third chime before the spell broke. As they filed out, one cadet lingered. A woman, maybe 21, jaw-tight voice, hesitant. "Admiral Rhodes. Was it worth it?" I paused, then smiled. "I'm still standing. That's your answer." Later that day, I stood inside the Hall of Honor. Marble echoed under my steps as I approached the wall lined with portraits. The newly framed photo had just been mounted, my father in full regalia standing next to me in my final uniform. Our eyes met the lens equally. For the first time, we shared more than blood. We shared space, respect. Beneath the photo, the engraved plaque read, "Admiral Natalie Rhodes, daughter, officer, witness, truth-bearer." Emily joined me as I stood in front of it. "He wanted to frame this," she said, handing me a soft leather-bound journal, "but he never knew where to hang it." I opened it slowly, my father's war journal, the one none of us had ever read. The ink had faded in places, but the lines were intact. The first page: "If she ever needs to know what kind of leader she already is, give her this." I didn't speak. Emily didn't need me to. A few days later, a letter arrived from across the globe. "Ethan, now posted in Australia. Still watching. Still healing. You led better in silence than they ever did with microphones. I owe you more than a second chance. I owe you my voice." I folded the letter and slid it between the pages of the journal. It belonged there, among scars and reflections. The last surprise came quietly. A plain box appeared on my office desk. No return address. No note. Inside were old photographs, some faded, some grainy, of my childhood. Me in dress whites at age 9. Me saluting my father in the yard. One photo I had never seen before: Margaret holding me on the academy steps. The ghost of a smile on her face. No signature, just the act itself, a gesture. Perhaps not forgiveness, but recognition. As evening fell, I closed my office door for the night. On the whiteboard, still fresh from the morning, were the last words I had written before the cadets left. "History isn't written by the loudest. It's written by the last one still standing." After years of erasure and silence, the truth finally stood tall, etched not just in medals or transcripts, but in the eyes of those who once turned away. Natalie's name, once redacted, now echoed through halls that once denied her. Justice came not with fanfare, but with the quiet collapse of every lie built to outlive her. Like the final note of a long-buried anthem, truth returned, not to redeem, but to remind. If this story struck a chord, like, share, and tell us your thoughts in the comments below. Type 1 if you felt seen, or 2 if something still didn't sit right.